Hey, very warm welcome to everyone, and it's great to have you here. Great to have you also back. I just wanted to give you a quick welcome and intro to Ascent. You might still know us as Parkside. We are still in the old Parkside office. We're still the same company now with a different name. We were acquired last summer at the Agile Austria. We also noticed where I participated. It was not so aware to people yet, so just give you a quick rundown what we're doing. We still do custom software development now with even more focus on data engineering and AI. And agility is always part of our daily business. So I always want to continue supporting the Agile community, of course. We grew bigger, but Graz is still our biggest office in the DACH region. We focus more on the DACH region here for us, but still have international clients, as you've been knowing from Parkside before, still working. Agile are really around the world, which is super fascinating. Happy to indulge in some discussions with you, of course, after our speaker session at the beginning. And that's already it from my end. Have a great evening. There's some food and drinks afterwards. Please mingle, enjoy the session. And now give it up to our speaker of the night. Thank you very much for coming and organizing as well. And have a great evening. Thank you, guys.
Or can I jump in a bit?
I haven't even started.
Just to announce him one more time, because I am excited. I did get to know Robert far before I actually met him in person. So it was 2016 that I got to know his comics, and I was fascinated. I was laughing so much. I was inspired, and I couldn't imagine that, 7, 8 years later, I will be working together with him. He's still a great inspiration of mine. And I was so happy to have a chance to persuade him to come to Graz from Vienna and to speak to you and to also transmit this energy that he's giving me daily, I would say even. So, Robert, stage is yours.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. The way she got me here was she said, you know, your performance enablement is tomorrow. I'm writing it this evening after the talk. So it was a subtle hint to it. So when I talked to Jelena and we said, look, what are we going to talk about? What would you like me to talk about? There's a few things I can talk about. What do you think would be interesting? And we've discussed at various times attitude towards Agile. What is Agile? What does it mean to be an Agile coach? How has that changed over time? And I said, oh, that sort of reminds me of that Shakespeare quote about the 7 ages of man. Okay, so the 7 ages of man is a monologue from the play called As You Like It. And it goes something on the lines of, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. And that's it. That's all the English lesson you're getting tonight. It's okay. It was my worst subject. I had to work very hard to just remember those 2 lines, okay? But the 7 ages of man was in there. Not actually just Shakespeare's concept. It's a pretty common concept from medieval times. This kind of, you know it as well from the guy, the fish coming out to the guy working on the computer as well. This kind of idea of change, of evolution. And I thought, well, that kind of ties in well with this kind of 7 ages or 7 phases, maybe would be a better way of putting it, thinking about Agile, how that was for me. So this is going to be very much my experience of what it was like starting as an Agile coach or being an Agile coach. Now, I've been in IT for over 25 years, and I've done my time in the classical big companies, big telcos and stuff like that as well. And for about the last 15, I've been involved in Agile. So I've had, my foot in both, so to speak. And this is just what my experience has been like. This is no absolute truth. It's a little bit like in a retrospective when you say everybody has their own truth. Well, this is what my experience is like. However, having talked to some of my colleagues who are Agile coaches and that, I think you'll probably find a bit of resonance. If you've had this kind of experience with Agile as well, you'll probably come up with something, experience something similar, maybe along the way, might be of interest to you. So this story isn't actually over. I know I might be retiring. Looks like I might be retiring very soon. Unfortunately, I'm not. I've got another 10 years still to go. But I'll tell you the story up to this point, okay? And we'll see what happens then afterwards. So this was a joke, actually, that came up at one point that I was doing a workshop for a friend at work, and he was putting in names that weren't strictly speaking like, I don't know, whatever I am, principal Agile coach or something. And I put in grizzled Agile veteran. Because sometimes that's what it feels like. It feels like you've been through the wars and you have the scars to show for it. So that's where that one actually came from. So that's where we are on that. And I'm cheating because there are no points in my slides. You'll find out the slides are extremely uninteresting, but this is my cheat sheet here. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be looking at. So let's see if any of this does resonate then with you or not. Okay, so first of all, I thought I'd start with life before Agile. Okay, now looking around the room, I'm going to go, some of you are going to know what I'm talking about, will have experienced this, and some of you probably grew up and heard about it at university. There's this thing called Agile, there's a thing called Scrum. Okay, 25 years ago, strictly speaking, 2001, yes, there was an Agile manifesto, but believe me, God, it had not reached Austria. Okay, it was still in Utah, had not moved out of there, and was going to take a long time to get across the water. So back then, there wasn't a lot. Okay, we used to do absolutely genuine waterfall projects. Now, I know I've heard you all say, and you all say, oh, we're not really Agile, we're actually waterfall. Ye don't know what a waterfall project is. Now, I'm looking at one gentleman over here, two gentlemen over here. There's a couple of us here that we're also not retiring tomorrow, but we've probably been in this. So when I say this, they'll probably go, oh yeah, fuck yeah. Guys, we used to do, there was a very famous V model that was used, okay? And it's still in use. You go to, any of you have the joy of doing fixed price contracts with government agencies will be familiar with the V model because they like to move with the times. So they're still doing the V model we had back then. And it starts off with writing the customer requirements, okay? Followed by the functional requirements, followed by the technical specs, followed by now you can write some code, okay? Then we'll write some tests on the code, then we'll do some integration tests, then we'll do some system tests, and then we'll do some user acceptance tests. I'm probably out of the picture. That's fine. That's what a V model is like. It, you know, at some point it is out of the picture. Guys, this used to literally take years. I mean, years. Just writing the user requirements and stuff like that could easily be 6 months of back and forth, if not 8 months. And if you were outsourcing your work, God bless them, to the company that's going to do the fixed price project, okay, you spent another 8 months wrangling over the functional specifications. Then they would write technical specifications that involved integrations into your systems, which took another 4 months. We haven't written a line of code and we're 1.5 years into the project. That's waterfall. That's what waterfall projects really were like, okay? And they were painful. They were really painful. They were like a death march. Because when you started one of these things, the timeline might have been 3 years, and you knew from experience 3 years was going to be 5 years. And at 5 years, we were only going to have a halfway acceptable product, okay? The feedback loop was there. In fairness to waterfall, there is a feedback loop, okay? Classic waterfall. The problem was the feedback loop was about 2.5 years into the project. Not like 2.5 months or 2 weeks later. It was like 2.5 years into the project, there'd be a feedback loop and go, this isn't going to quite work the way we thought. They were genuine waterfall projects, okay? And that's what I was, if you want to put it this way, raised with, okay? You went in, you didn't know any better. You were well, wasn't that fresh, but out of university, you go in, this is how we do things. This is how it works. This is the plan. This was also in a large telco. You have an awful lot of external suppliers. You're doing fixed price projects and stuff like that. If you ever wondered where contract, what was it said, customer collaboration over contract negotiation in the agile values, if you've ever sat in meetings arguing with the supplier about whether this is in the functional requirements or not, and where you interpret it this way, and the supplier is basically getting his money back, because to get the contract in the first place on a fixed price waterfall project, he had to go down low. He knows he's losing. Change requests are how you make the money. Right, you make the money on the change requests. How do you do that? You get the customer to sign off on the documents, and everything you got wrong, you nail him to the wall with it and charge him 50,000 euros just to talk to him about it. That's what it was like. That's what the real projects were like. This was my lived experience, back in the day when we were doing this. Okay, so I just stole this from one of my comics. I wanted to say dinosaur times because I'm a bit of a dinosaur, and in the old days. Okay, that was life before Agile. Okay, so now I'm going to go through a few of the phases that, you know, how I kind of see the way the phases were when I first started, when I got into Agile, okay? Now, I started off in Agile, and I'll put it in my back pocket. Hang on. I started off in Agile, and I'll bet none of you are going to get this sketch, probably because it's bad, but also because culturally it's the equivalent of showing Bina Maya to somebody from Ireland when they first get here. You just don't get it, okay? This is Judge Dredd from the comic 2000 AD, okay? Judge Dredd was famous for saying, "I am the law," and just meting law out on the spot. No courts, no juries, nothing, okay? I had a true believer phase when I discovered Scrum. I'm not even going to use the word Agile at this moment. It was Scrum. If you'd asked me about, I didn't know about the Agile Manifesto or anything like that at that time. It was just Scrum, but I discovered Scrum. And I had an epiphany, okay? The light, I saw the light, okay? This was Paul on the road to Damascus. This was JD Vance on the road to being the vice president. I changed course. I saw the light. It was like, hallelujah. And boy, did I have problems trying to understand why nobody else saw the light. Because I had seen the light, everybody else should see the light, right? It was obvious. I mean, how could you not see this? So I had this absolute, the zeal of the convert, okay? You know the people, like the worst people are the guys who stop smoking. You know, they're the ones that like, really go at you because they've managed to stop, okay? This was the convert thing. And there was this new world opened up. So what happened was we had a project going, and there was this massive, big, year-long, 3-year-long, millions already spent on the contact center, basically, and it hadn't worked. We were under pressure to meld 2 contact centers together for a merger, and we had to get it done in 6 months. So you know the way life-changing decisions only seem to be that afterwards? I stupidly said, yeah, we can do that with Agile. Give me 4 developers and the guys from the contact center will get that done. That was a life-changing decision, which I didn't know at the time, okay? But for better or for worse, I said, let's do this. And a friend of mine was a really good, Tony was just brilliant for all things Scrum. And he basically was our Scrum master. And we started to build this thing. And I loved it. You've got to understand, going from months-long talking to customers and stuff to the guys, and they were from the contact center, sitting with them virtually every day, deciding what was the most important thing to build, you know? And you were able to kind of strip things away. The old way of doing a project was you basically took everything you could possibly think of that you might need, and you put it in a bucket and you tipped it into the project, whether you need it or not. But you never know, you might need it. So it's better to have it in there to not have it in there, because this is your one chance to get something done, okay? And everything goes in, whether you need it or not. So, you know, and then so the great thing about this project with the contact center was that basically you could go to the guys and say, look, do you really need reporting in the first week after we launch? Or if we have everything in the logs and we can give it to you 2 sprints later, is that okay too? You could have those kind of conversations. This was just like, I was amazed. I was flabbergasted. This was like the best thing ever. Obviously, it was too good to be true. So what happened was, yes, the development, yes, the work with the contact center, yes, the testing, all that was going fine. But you run up against the organization, okay? And the organization back in 2010, 2011 was not ready for Agile. No way. And we were saying, well, we could be delivering different software every 2 weeks, you know, like slight upgrades and stuff. And they're going, no, we need a handbook in operations. We need to know exactly how to deploy this. We need to have something where we how to roll it back. We need to go. It was a nightmare, okay? And there was this huge gap between the reality of what we were trying to do and the way the organization around us was structured and the way it thought, okay? And the worst thing was, I think I picked up the, I'm going to put it this way, the hate managers. Okay, I picked up that Scrum infection that you get sometimes where managers are always the bad guys, right? And I think I really took this to heart because it seemed to me like, hey, why aren't these managers making changes so we can get this to work? Why isn't there more support to get this done? So I was definitely, you know, managers were the root of all evil and teams were brilliant. And why couldn't they see this? So this actually didn't have to be honest with you, didn't actually have a particularly happy ending because the other thing that happened, remember that project I mentioned, the long waterfall project they've been running for 3 years? How to make enemies is to build something in like 6 months, which they couldn't get done in 3 years. It's just not a good look. So and politically, there was very little or no support coming from management for a lot of this stuff. They didn't really care. I didn't understand this at the time. They didn't care if we were doing Scrum or Kanban or just doing classic project management. They just wanted something done, and we were getting it done. But basically, I had to jump. before I got a burnout. But I was such a true believer, it was worth it. For Scrum, I was prepared to die on that hill, so I jumped. So sometimes you'll jump about, you're not a real Scrum Master till you've been fired or something like that, or till you've left. I would not subscribe to that, but please don't do that. It wasn't fun, okay? But it was that phase where I was totally such a believer that I thought, okay, this is the way to go. I can't stay here. I have to remain true to my values, okay? So I was a martyr for Scrum is what I was in many ways. After this phase, though, having been a martyr for Scrum, okay, a little bit more realism kind of crept in. And the next phase is what I've decided to call the apprentice. Anybody recognize? Yeah, too much here. If I go Cobra Kai, will the younger people here go, oh yeah, the Karate Kid? Well, that was the original poster, the original pose back in the 1984 film. And the reason why is that the phase after that, I think, if you're familiar with Alistair Cockburn at all, co-signatory of the Agile Manifesto, just look at his LinkedIn bio, it's written underneath. Really good thinker, and he used to talk about shu ha ri, if you're familiar with martial arts, okay? And the shu bit is in the Karate Kid, the bit where you've seen the film, he's told to like paint the fence. I'm not sure if it's left, right, or it's up, down with paint the fence. And then it's wax on, wax off, okay? And in this shu phase, it's like learn these basics. You do not question your sensei, you do what you're told to do, okay? And this was this sort of phase that I was in with Scrum at the time. It was learning the mechanics of how Scrum works in a rather, this is the Scrum Bible, and this is the way it's done, and there's only one true way to do it. The other phases that Callister talks about are ha and re. Ha is where you learn new techniques, where you break out of this kind of rigid way of thinking that you might have about the system and about how it works. So you break out of this and you take in and try out other things and you combine them. And the re phase is sometimes considered then, it's what he describes as the consultancy phase. It's where you don't really think about what you're going to use. You just automatically seem to know what it is. And he calls it the, well, it depends phase. So when you're asked a question, you don't say, oh, you do this, you do that. You say, it depends. What's the context, you know? So shu, ha, ri. This was sort of like the shu phase. This was like basically doing it absolutely Scrum by the book. Now, back then, we're talking about, again, 2011, 2012, all this kind of time, there was like Scrum butt meters, okay, that you could, I tried looking for it on the internet the other day, I couldn't find it anymore. There was a Scrum butt meter because lots of people would say, we're doing Scrum, but, and it was like, we don't have a PO. We're doing Scrum, but we don't have a Scrum Master. We're doing Scrum, but we don't do sprints. It was this kind of thing. And even back then, I don't know if you've looked at LinkedIn recently, but it's really similar discussions are still going on about absolutely, oh, you could tear what's left of my hair out, kind of going, why? But that's the kind of stuff we talked about. And it was about doing it very much by the book. And there was this kind of cultish bit around it that there was an elite and proper way to do it and everybody else was doing it wrong, okay? So this was this kind of phase of learning all this stuff. I was working with different teams, I had a chance to try out different things with different teams and move, you know, learn a little bit from it. But this is the kind of I feel like the apprentice phase, the shu phase. So one of the things I did do, I have to confess, but then I think we've all done this. I did do a CSM in this time. Who hasn't? Everybody's a certified Scrum Master. The advantage was I think it had about 2 or 3 years of experience by the time I got to the course, and that made a huge difference, you know, to my experience of it, you know, because I was coming in with a bunch of questions about real world problems and what actually goes on and what do you do when and all this kind of stuff. So that was also part of my apprentice phase. Now, after that, one I've come up with next, I've decided to call it, is the coach. This is actually not a picture of a coach. I was finding it difficult to draw up. Oh, by the way, have you noticed these are not AI pictures? These were sketched last night at 10 o'clock, and Yelena will confirm this because she got the message from me on Slack going, I finally got the pictures done. These were sketched last night at about 10 o'clock, and I went, feck it, I'm just going with them. The problem is, this was going to originally be called Teacher. It's actually a picture of my dad when he used to teach. And my dad was sometimes called Batman because he had one of these these protectors to stop the chalk. Yes, they had chalk and blackboards. Weird concept, I know. Chalk blackboards, and this protected you from the chalk. So he'd walked around with this thing. So sometimes I was son of Batman. So that's not really a coach, it's a teacher. But ID is supposed to be a coach, okay? So about 2014, I joined Anacon. And I joined basically as an external Scrum Master, external Agile coach, which is quite different to being in the teams, which is where I'd been before. I'd either been a developer, an architect, I'd been product owner, I'd been Scrum Master, I'd been in the teams, and very often double jobbing, okay? So not that unusual at the time to be doing, double roles and stuff like that. So I was doing that a lot. So then I get to go to Anacon, and Anacon was great for a few reasons. One of them was you were on the outside trying to help teams on the inside, basically. You weren't a part of the team, though. You had to be able to kind of sell things a little bit differently. You're not actually operatively delivering part of what they're delivering. So I had a chance to take a look into an awful lot of companies and see how a lot of companies tick, how different types of teams that we had and stuff like that. But there were two things that really, I think, stick out from that I loved about Anacon. The chances that it gave me. And one of them was I got to hold trainings. And trainings, all of a sudden, if you want to learn something, okay, teach it. It is so true. And basically, I got the chance to teach about agility. And I'll be honest with you, at that point, I'd really just done an awful lot of Scrum. The Agile Manifesto, the principles, my favorite part, actually, Cynefin, stuff like this. I didn't know about that at the time. And so this opened up a whole, how can I put it, a more grounded basis to my thinking than the kind of intuition I'd been running with beforehand, which was, this is just right. I've done the other stuff, that's wrong, so this has to be right. And now there was like, oh, there's reasoning behind this. There's a good reason to do this. There's some thinking behind this. There's books behind this. It was like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. And on a small aside, because Stefan actually brought this up today, like learning about Cynefin and the idea that you can talk about complicated versus complex is how I start every training or basically any discussion about anything that has to do with Agile. Because I just ask people, look at the world we're living in and the environment we're in. Is it complex or complicated? And you're always in a complex as soon as you're dealing with people. Even if the technology is known and we know it's a bloody database admin, I don't care what it is. As soon as people are involved, they can change their minds. It's always complex when people are involved. So once you get to that point, you can say, and how do we solve complex problems? And then you're into, oh, we need to do it in small steps. Oh, we need to get feedback. Oh, and you're like, yes, yeah, what could we call that? I don't know. So that's a super kind of way of getting into it. And all this stuff was new to me. I was like, this is just a great chance to kind of learn this stuff and to kind of take, to see there's a much bigger, broader picture to and a lot more behind this than just going, waterfall is shit and I hate managers. So there was a lot more to it than that, and that was great. And the other thing I think that was good about it was also not just about the Agile stuff as well, but started to work with Kanban and Flow and stuff like that as well. Now, initially, I kind of wrote Kanban off as a poor man's version of Scrum. Okay, it's just like, it's Scrum, but you don't have the balls to do it properly. It's like, yeah, okay, it's Scrum, but to the power of 2. So that was my view of Kanban. You see how I was really a pain in the ass. But that's what I thought it was. And then I got into Kanban. And actually, Kanban was a better fit for most of the teams that we were working with, which were actually groups, which had changing priorities and unexpected work coming in the time. Kanban was actually a way better fit. And I really grew to love Kanban. And I would hold Kanban trainings, and then you'd learn about the Toyota production system, and you start getting into flow metrics, and you get into a whole other side of things. Although that never really finished the Don Reinertsen book, because it was just like, that's way too much work to read all of that. But there was this whole other world out there. So this was a real broadening of my thinking away from just, oh, this is so much better than waterfall, and Scrum's the only way to do it, and you got to do it by the book. In this case, this was the habit where you break out and you learn some new stuff, and you go, oh, there's all these other things out there as well. That's interesting. So this was what I loved about that phase. There was this chance to kind of really spread your wings, learn new things, kind of broaden your mind and go, oh, there's just so much there. So that was pretty cool. So what did I come up with next? Oh, right. Yeah, give me 2 seconds. This is the old comedian's trick. You know, why they have the bottle of water, they have to open like this so they can actually think about what the fuck was the next joke I was going to do. I'm actually thirsty. Yes, the next phase. Dr. Frankenstein. And it's important. A lot of people, when you say Frankenstein, they think it's the monster. But it's actually Dr. Frankenstein's monster. And I felt at some point that I was a Dr. Frankenstein creating these monsters that were kind of collages of Safe, Spotify, Scrum, these agile transformations that just whatever came out at the end seemed to look like this. You know, it was just abominations, okay? So what had happened in this phase? What was going on now? So things started to move away from the teams. So up to this point where I was with you so far, pretty much looking at teams, talking to teams, dealing with teams and groups, but on that team level. And then it's a little bit, sometimes I think like we have these iterations of Agile basically happening. The first one was a bottom-up push. An awful lot of the time was a bottom-up push from teams. They'd heard about it. They wanted to do it. The organization wasn't coming with us, but the teams were trying to get as much as they could out of it, okay? It feels like the second iteration of Agile came top-down, where then IT departments decided we're going to make everything Agile. You know, it seems to be the thing. We're going to push Agile from the top down, and we're going to bring Agile around. And this is where you get the scaling frameworks and stuff like that coming in. That's that kind of top-down kind of thing. But now, at least we're doing this on an organizational level. So we're kind of going for that amount of people. And so, in theory, it was great. We were now doing Agile transformations. Somebody was a bit confused by this recently. They said because I said I hadn't seen a successful Agile transformation. He said he saw several teams that had done that. And I said, no, I'm talking about organizations. Agile transformations is when they said, we're doing the whole organization. Now, this was largely done without looking at the ops guys, for example, and saying, is Scrum really a good fit for ops? You know, I don't know. No, we're doing Scrum and it's across the board. Everybody march off to your training and let us know when you come back. And there was an awful lot of this kind of like one size fits all thinking that came with this kind of stuff, which was, you know, a little bit depressing. And then you had, so different models, depending on where you might be, did stuff that was Kanban, did stuff that was like Kanban oriented, basically, did stuff that was Spotify oriented, did stuff that was safe and stuff like that. They were the main kind of ones that came up. But the KPIs were always so little understanding of change management. The KPIs were things that you can sell upwards in this kind of systems, right? So the KPIs were, has the team had a training? Yes. Does the team have a Kanban board? Yes. Does the team have it daily? Yes. Does the team have a retro every 4 weeks? Yes. Okay, mission accomplished. There was nothing about the impact. And if you went to the guys that has your way of working changed? No, we still work the same way, but we have Post-its on the wall. Okay, that's the difference. We have Post-its everywhere. Excellent. That's how our work has changed. And so very often, not an awful lot stayed over. There was some stuff I saw around the Spotify stuff that wasn't too bad because they did try and get business and IT closer together. They were in an unusual position that they actually could bring business and IT closer together. In most companies, you actually have the mother company up here, particularly if you're dealing, as I did at the time, a lot with insurance companies or with banks or with bigger organizations like that. For some reason, it was considered clever to make your IT company into, or you make your IT into a daughter company, which is now a profit and loss system, and is basically, it's a software factory, okay? And the software factory is costing us way too much money. So we're going to make it Agile, okay? And it always worked really well. So an unacceptance or an unwillingness to accept the complexity of what software is, and in my view also to accept that you could consider the digitalization or what we're talking about with digitalization in fact is putting IT at the center of any organization and can't be seen as something that we have as a separate company down here. We can't run the company without it. But we're not an IT company. No, you're not. But IT is an integral part of who you are. It's not over there with its own CEO and with its own politics. So that's the sort of thing we were doing. I don't know how familiar you are with Laloux's reinventing organizations. just to hear about reinventing organizations, basically with Lulu was, I'll keep an eye. Reinventing organizations with Lulu is basically, and normally the organizations we're dealing with are KPI driven organizations, pretty much meritocracies, KPIs, orange colored organizations. The next level above this in Lulu's kind of evolution of organizations, his starting, his lower level organizations like the mafia, or Donald Trump's America. And it works its way up past the church and the army and comes up into what we could call a traditional company at the moment, which would be KPI driven, results driven and stuff like that. Level above this again is more team and purpose oriented and stuff in green. Okay, so what you sometimes had, if you were lucky at the end of this, similar to what we had before, you were little islands of green in a great big orange sea. Basically, the company itself was still basically a KPI-driven company. Some of the Agile stuff stuck in a few places. It was one of the things I noticed was Agile could never get too big in a company because then it was treated like a foreign body. So it was like something, it was like an invasion. So you had to put a little layer around the Agile bit sometimes to make it look like we're working with, so if you want those reports, yes, we'll give you those reports. But actually we're working like this, we're just not telling you. So you saw a lot of this kind of like shielding going on. So people would have, something like that and little pockets of it. So it's not like it was completely pointless, but it was difficult to get that. And it could never grow because if it got too big, it would be spotted and the company at large would go, nope, and push it out again. So it would get killed, unfortunately. So I felt a bit like a Dr. Frankenstein. Operating, trying to change things, you'd be brought in, you'd be pushed in quite hard time-wise. You'd have they'd be like, well, you're in for 3 months, you're in for 6 months, you might be 4 days a week and stuff like that, and you're trying to change something, okay? So that's where we were with that. Afterwards, after this phase, or with enough of this phase, having done several years of this, the next phase, I think, is this. I was a cynic, okay? Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, drank several bottles of wines afterwards. Okay, I was to a certain extent burnt out, I suppose, when it comes to Agile. I could not hear the word Agile. I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't want to hear managers talk about it anymore. Okay, I just it was.
Time when you started to do the call?
No. Comics started, actually, the comics started around the coach time because the comics, if anyone, so I there's an online cartoon called the Agile Drill Sergeant, which I used to draw. And if you look at them, they start in about 2017, 2016, 2017. And they actually start at a time when I was completely into the coaching side of things. And I was being really nice to everybody. And I wasn't pushing. And I was going, oh, only if you want to kind of thing. And there was the other bit inside me that just wanted to whack people over the back of the head and say, get a fucking move on, let's do this shit. Okay, we'll get software out the door. If you look at the comics and look at the start of the comics and follow them through, you'll see that there's a lot of violence at the start, which was me trying to deal with the frustration of trying to be too coachy rather than actually pushing. So I also, my thinking on that, Stefan, funnily enough, that swang quite a bit as well from, oh, we got to do it this way, to being too coachy. And in my view, too coachy. I was just like too much, to kind of going, no, you've got to push a bit and see if people move with it or don't move with it. Because if you don't push, it's too easy to say, nah, we don't want to. So no, the comics actually started around here, but you'll find the cynic comics in there. But it was the realization that none of these transformations were ever going to work. It was, you do 3 or 4 of these and you go, they're never going to work because they were never treated as the kind of transformation or cultural change that they needed to be. The genuine interest in where the change should happen, okay, the genuine interest to change things wasn't really there. And to be absolutely brutally honest about it, the interesting thing here was I didn't hate managers anymore. I realized that managers were working under a huge amount of stress and strain, their own constraints that I wasn't always aware of, that was determining that they had very little room to maneuver. So it was unfair to be going, oh, you guys, it's all your fault. No way. But if you follow that up, right, let's just say, so it's like the teams want to do it, and the managers don't have the room to do it. Well, who's decided? Why is that? You follow it up. And literally, my opinion is that this happens pretty much on the C-level. And if you've read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team with Lenin Coney, I think it is, can never say his name properly, but 5 dysfunctions of a team. And as an example, I think in the book, he takes a management team, right? And he says how this management team is not a team. Well, I have never seen a C-level group that I would consider to be a team. Okay, this is my little kingdom over here, and you are not getting any of it. Yes, I know you need people, but you're not getting mine. And this is my little bit over here. And if I have to shaft you to get to my bonus, tough shit. So this is, you know, how do we expect it to be any different further down the company? Why should it be any different? The company reflects the way it works at the top. A lot of companies, and most companies, are big enough, they're fat enough, they're rich enough most of the time to be able to afford these inefficiencies. Now, as an agile coach, your heart might, I don't know if I'm being, your heart might bleed when you see this. But it doesn't matter, because money-wise up at the top, they're doing fine. They don't care about this. So one of the first, you know, this phase was to learn, it doesn't matter that all this stuff is near and dear to my heart. You know, what breaks your icky heart? Icky, picky heart. Guys, it's like, you know, they don't care, because they're looking at a different world up there. Their world is different. They have different priorities. There's a whole bunch of different politics going on. They don't actually care about all of this. They just want results, and they want nice results which make them look good. How you get to them is beside the point. And that's just the way it is. So I got to this point where I was pretty cynical. That resulted, if I did a talk one time as a management guru called Conor McConnor. And in this talk, I pretended to be a management guru, and I sold every single anti-pattern you've ever seen that killed Agile as a brilliant pattern for a manager to keep their job. Just flipped it around. And I said, look, as a manager, you get a scrum master in, first thing you do, you give him 3 teams to look after and tell him to be no problem, okay? Then you tell him you want 64 JIRA reports at the end of every sprint, okay? And he's so busy, he isn't a threat. Nothing will happen. So I saw all the stuff we hate. If you look at it from a manager point of view, it's a great way of keeping your job. It's a great way of keeping your power. It's a great way of not giving up your ability to do things. So if you flip it around, it makes sense. Craig Larman, who did large-scale Scrum, the LESS framework, he has his rules of organizational behavior. The first rule of organizational behavior is basically that organizations are optimized to avoid changing the status quo, middle and first level manager, and specialist positions and power structures. Organizations literally don't want the change. This is one of the greatest truisms ever. Why we ever start transformations is beyond me when you know what he's written. And when you talk to upper level managers and realize, no, it's about my bonus. It's about, I'm moving on from here in 2 years. I'm not interested in this. So this was the cynical phase that I was kind of going through. It was like, I also didn't like selling Agile to people and explaining what Agile was, knowing full well that organization was never going to let them actually handle this, to be able to do this. And also in that talk from Conor McConnor about the management stuff, I had brought in a character called Grumpy Old Developer. And Grumpy Old Developer was the guy in the retros when you'd be there and he'd be sitting back going, yeah, seen it all before. Yeah, we tried that before, and that won't work here. And he was right. He was right. That won't work here. He was absolutely right. He had seen it all before, and he was right. I was wrong. He was right. And he was dead on. He knew the culture of the company. If you get the slide set afterwards, I have links from each of these phases to a comic that covers this. And there's one of them about coach versus the coach versus culture. I think it kind of sums it up well. So where am I now? Okay, so that was the phase. Well, I still like a bottle of wine, but pragmatist. Okay, at the moment, I think I'm in a phase where I would consider it to be pragmatism at this stage. Basically, pick your battles. You know, there's no point raging against everything. You can only change so much. There are constraints, boundaries wherever you are working that you are not going to be able to change. And there's no point, as much as this sounds, there's no point getting angry or getting frustrated or trying to change them, because it ain't going to happen. Large corporations will always do, from our point of view, stupid things. That's their right, unfortunately. So I've kind of learned, if I've learned anything, I think you can get old and have lots of experience and not get wiser. The only way to get old and get wiser is to learn from the experience. So maybe I've learned a little bit from the experience. There are certain battles that aren't worth starting because you're not going to change what's happening in the company. It's just going to be that way. So that's just the way that is. But what I have also seen is changes do happen. They just take way longer than you want them to. There is change. It just happens on a much, much slower time scale than you might hope it does. So I was out one time I'd asked a coach from Spotify who was now working with Safe as well to come over and explain the differences between Spotify and Safe. And the first night I managed to talk Joachim into going for a few Guinness. The next day he talked me into going to cocktails. And then over the cocktails, I was saying, so how do you do it? You've done Spotify and now you're looking how Safe works. This must be really difficult. And he said, lower your expectations. It is the best piece of advice I ever got as an Agile coach. Really, lower your expectations. It's such a relief. You don't know how many small wins you actually have, and then you can take them as wins, because no, they're not. It's not an ideal win that we got, but yes, there is change, there is improvement, things do move along. It's okay, there is some progress. It's just not half as fast as I'd like it to be. And if I compare it with the time when I was back here and I want it to happen instantly, there's no comparison. It doesn't work that way. So my rule these days is meet teams, managers, organizations where they are and not where you think they should be. Because back here, I expected them to see the world like I did, and they should get there immediately in one bound. It's never going to happen. So one of the things I like about, so I think of Agile coaching personally as very much like being a sports coach. Okay, you've done this shit, you know how it works, you can help somebody get better at it. The whole coach bit, when it goes into the coachy coach bit, is not really where I see myself or my strengths or anything else like that. But what I do love out of the stuff that I did look at in this was solution-focused coaching. I really like that a lot. And the idea of, on a scale of 0 to 10, where are you? What is +1? And asking that question in these situations and going, given this situation that we are in here, with these boundary conditions, with these constraints, what is the best change that could happen here that would bring the maximum impact? And it doesn't matter which bit of the toolbox I'm going to use here. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's Scrum or if it's a stand-up or if it's a retro, if it's a board, if it's flow metrics, it doesn't matter. What would bring the most benefit? And that's, that's the pragmatic bit. What's going to bring the most benefit? What's going to, in this given situation? You can always decide this situation isn't for you and you want to go somewhere else. That's fine. But if you're happy and you can think about it and you go, yeah, okay, why not do that? So actually, as an example, I think, to be brutally honest about being a pragmatist, I went from being an external coach to going back to being an internal coach because I actually wanted to get things done. Okay, and this was a major kind of trip for me in my head to do this, because one of the things was I would sit on the outside looking in, and I love, you'd sit and you could see bad decisions. Okay, from my point of view, bad decisions being made inside a company, and you go, oh God, you poor bastards, it doesn't affect me. I'm out of here. That's okay. So, there you go. And to go back in and kind of say, right, I'm going to ride with this. I'm going to be part of this again. But I actually wanted to be part of something again. But what I was bringing with me this time is the changes are happening slower. And but I can see the changes. I'm better at spotting how there are small changes and how things have got better, and and having more patience, basically, to see things move, see things moving forward. And we've discussed this recently because sometimes we get frustrated at the pace of change. We said, no, actually there has been improvement and we can see stuff coming down the line. Is it where we wanted to get to? Not yet, but that's great. It means we still have a job. We've got stuff to do. So, it's good. So that's sort of what I consider to be the pragmatist phase, where it's like, what works here? What do we need? Why don't we do this? So, last one. Lucky ye. So, I've got, like, as I was saying, what comes next? 7 phases, I don't know. All I know is I've been in it long enough to know there's been different phases. I presume there's probably a few phases waiting for me. I still don't know what they are, to be honest with you. But something's happening. I mean, I think we've all noticed, or at least my impression, I'm not on LinkedIn as much as I used to be, but the market for Agile coaching and stuff like that's kind of gone off a cliff, or it certainly appeared to for a long time go off a cliff. I think we're seeing a bit of a backlash against the Agile industrial complex, as they like to call it. But let's be honest, when everybody is a CSM and when everybody's got a safe qualification, it becomes meaningless. Okay, so that's, you know, I think we're a little bit, we bit ourselves, you know, in the arse basically with that kind of stuff. I don't think though that we're, I don't think this is going anywhere. You know, there's a part of me that kind of goes, the problems haven't changed. The problems are still the same. They've always been the same. I mean, the best bit is they say, all right, we're going to get rid of programmers and we're just going to use AI and you just need to prompt it correctly. Anybody who's done requirements engineering, anybody who's done requirements engineering will go, good fucking luck with that. See you in 3 years. We're back to waterfall. That's never going to work because people can't articulate what they want. Okay? This isn't going to happen. Yes, we are going to have AI-assisted programmers. Certain things will get programmed fast. The dirty work of the back and forth, finding out what we actually want and what's going to work and stuff like that, that's still there. It's not going to go. Same thing with coaching. Guys, the problems aren't going anywhere. And if we accept those problems are still in a complex space, there is only one answer about how we get to that, and that is we need to have transparency about where we are. We take small increments, we get feedback on the change we made, and we align again and decide what to do next. It's not going to change. I mean, Agile's not particularly clever, to be honest. We do this in our daily lives all the time. It's just CFOs don't do it an awful lot. They like to plan for 5 years and expect it to run that way. So that's probably why in companies, it's a big deal to try and get something Agile in there. But I don't see this going anywhere. Those problems are all still there. So I don't think this is, you know, we're going to see much of a change there. I do think, though, we need to have, one of the things, it's not enough to be loved by your teams, okay? And they think you're brilliant. Management needs to know your added value as well, however you want to get that done. But you need to have defenders on the management side of things who say, yeah, the stuff they're doing with those teams, it's brilliant. They were a mess beforehand and now they're really producing and I want to get them across and put them over there or whatever it happens to be. But you need, my view, obviously this is all my view. This isn't gospel or anything. It's just my point of view. But my point of view, you need people on the management side, the people who can make decisions, the people who do this and say, right, no, we're keeping him. He's good. We're keeping them. They're good. Keeping her. She's great. We need this kind of thing. If you listen, there's a talk from David Snowden, and he says there's at least 3 waves of firings at IBM that he survived, even though in theory he should have been gone. But people went, no, he's useful, he's good. And that's networking, guys. That's networking. It's getting what you're doing, getting that feedback, making sure they know what you're actually doing. You need to sell yourselves. If you're seen as an extension of HR, if the view of you is basically holding hands and doing group therapy sessions for developers, they are not going to, you're not productive. This isn't actually helping, okay? If you can make your work in the context of making sure, and this isn't the end of the day, why do we do Agile? What was the whole point behind this? We're doing it to get better quality software out to our customers and quality and software they actually want to have. That's why we do all this. The rest of this, everything to retros and holding hands and one-on-ones and coaching and all that shit is only so that can happen here. No, probably not in the picture anymore. Only so that can happen here, guys. It's only so we can fucking deliver software. Sorry, it's about delivering software. If you're not helping us deliver software, rant mode. If you're not helping us deliver software, guys, that's not fucking Agile coaching. Sorry, it's something else. But you're getting software out the door better than we were doing it before. And if you can sell that to management, that that's what you're doing, your job's safe. That's what we're actually doing. So sometimes I thought, would it be better to be called a software development lifecycle coach or something? But it's a little bit of a mouthful. If you ever think about the name that we have, Agile Coach, it's the methodology we're talking about, not what we do. So if you think about it, if you were to say, if this is your job and you're thinking about this, what is it I do? What do I actually do? I mean, I consider I try to bring in improvements. Okay, that's what like a continuous improvement coach or whatever you want to call it. But I would love to get away from the word Agile. I really would. Because that's a methodology and it's got a certain burnt smell around it at the moment, I think. Okay, I still totally believe in it, but I don't need to be calling it that. So one thing, I'll finish up. The good news, I'm going to finish up now. Am I on time? That's amazing. I have no idea how long I took. I'm sorry. But okay, you remember when I started, Agile wasn't the game changer we sold it to be. Okay, I used to think there was a phase, I don't know where I'll be around here somewhere. I'd say, I used to go, why, if Agile is so good, is it not the fact that when companies do stuff in an Agile way, they get such a competitive advantage that actually other companies need to do Agile to catch up? Why isn't that? Largely because we were doing it, if you look at the chain from an idea all the way through to actually getting into the customer's hand, we were looking at this part of the chain. So we weren't taking the overall, the big picture. Yes, I know business agility is supposed to do that. Good luck. Companies are massive. They're huge, big organisms. They're cultures. And you can't just like zoom in on one bit and make that a little bit faster and expect it to have that kind of effect. Having said that, if you go back to what I described to you guys earlier when I said waterfall projects, what they were like. Seriously, guys, Agile won. We actually won. Think about it. It's changed how we do projects. We don't do projects like that anymore. Is it Agile Nirvana, a la Scrum Guide, where we have self-empowered teams running around the place having creative ideas and innovation and God knows what else? No, it's not. It's not that. But if you compare it to what we had before, and if we talk about change and progress, and you compare it with the projects I did 20 years ago, the projects I did 10 years ago, and compare it to how we work now, it's a fucking big difference. Is it ideal? God, no, it's not, which is brilliant. I've still got work to do. But it's way better than it was. It is way, way, way better than it was. So I think, in the end of the day, I think we have a win in there if you take a look. So there you go. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that was interesting.
And now let's get to the questions. So the first one, if you had to pick one phase as your favorite, which one would it be?
Coach, I felt like I was learning the most and my horizons were broadening and I was helping other people as well. That was definitely the best phase. That was just this feeling of, I still love learning, although you get to a point where you feel like you've heard a lot of it before. But at that point, it was learning so much, but also being able, you might have noticed, I like training or preaching basically. And so also this ability, or to have the chance to hold trainings and stuff like that. The catch with the trainings is normally I have to tell myself before it's a training, don't preach, don't preach, don't preach. I get about 4 sentences into the training and I start preaching. So, but no, that's the favorite phase. Coach was my favorite phase.
Okay, thank you. So next one. So you shared some really nice stories about your long life in agility. So how would you recommend someone who is new to agility to start the journey?
I think that there's a certain, there's an inevitability about certain steps, I think, and I think you have to go through them. I remember when I first started the Agile stuff, okay, and I remember somebody who must have been roughly my age tried to tell me, like 15 years ago, whatever it was, that maybe I shouldn't run against walls so hard because they're not going to move, okay? And I was just, at the time, incapable of understanding this. And I get it, and that's fair enough. And that's exactly the way it should be, because otherwise you wouldn't do these things. So I think there's a certain, you've got to be enthusiastic. I think we need this enthusiasm. When I say this is what I went through, I think you need to go through, not necessarily in this order are these ones, but I think you have to find your own way. It's going to be different for everybody.
So no shortcuts?
if I found them, I'd have got there a lot quicker. No, not that I know of. I think the great thing was everything you learn, and even if it's painful, as long as you're learning from whatever happens, I think you're on the right path. As long as it's a learning experience and not, try to minimize the risks, but learning experience is good.
Thanks. Okay, next one. What do you do when you achieve the cynic phase? How do you survive it and move on?
A lot of wine. I didn't start smoking. How do you achieve? When you achieve the cynic phase, I love the fact that it's achieved the cynic phase. Like, oh, my badge. Yes, I'm a CSM, safe and cynic. Actually, we could create a new framework that's called the Cynic framework. The Cynic phase, that was really difficult. Actually, I think when I drew the pictures last night, I'll be honest, I drew the pictures last night and I looked at the Cynic and I went, oh, it looks like a really sad sack. And then I went, oh, that's actually how I felt at the time. It wasn't much fun. It was about, again, people will tell you things, and I think you have to experience it yourself. My friend had said to me, Tony had said to me, you've got to look for the small wins. You've got to look at what you can do. And I wasn't. I was, it was all or nothing, big, and I had to come away from that. I had to lower my expectations. So I think you need to go through that as well, to a certain extent.
Thanks. Next one. What advice would you give your current self, or would your current self give to each of your earlier phases?
Each of my earlier phases. Oh God. What were the phases again? I see this as would I give any advice? I don't know if you can. Like, I don't have any regrets. I feel like certain things had to happen. I wouldn't be standing here like I am now if this had gone differently. And if I gave myself advice then, it wouldn't have gone the same way. I mean, I do wish I hadn't quite eaten up so much of my own energy sometimes. I think that's the worst bit, when that bit where I nearly went into a burnout, or where you get so wrapped up in it. That's not healthy. So if there was some way of kind of making sure, putting that handbrake in terms of looking after your own health versus the other stuff, that would be the, put that handbrake in a bit earlier than where it was. I think that would be the bit I'd like to do. But the other stuff, I think you got to have your wins and your losses, your successes and your failures, and learn that ability to kind of experiment. And if it doesn't work, well, hopefully I can learn from it.
I have to say, nice response. I really like that.
Need a handbrake?
Okay, next one. But do we need the word agile to promote what is actually common sense?
These days, I think the word agile is it's been abused so much at this stage. I think it's become relatively meaningless, to be honest. So I'm not sure we need the word agile to promote. It is common sense. It's not common sense in organizations. I think this is the difference. You've got to see how an organization works versus the way we live our personal lives. I saw something in LinkedIn, they brought out a book about, how to live an agile life or something like that. And I went, what? You need that book for? We do this every bloody day. We're all agile. It's nothing special about agile. We deal with complex problems every day. When the train doesn't turn up on time, when you have a meeting, you can decide, do I take a taxi? That's being agile. Whoa. I think if there was one person I'd change in a company, if I was trying to explain something, I often said this would be, I'd go back to the CFO. My theory is it's the CFO and the way we budget inside big companies that determines the way we actually do the work, and why it's often set up that way. And they often have 5-year plans. And I think if you wanted to break something up, you'd have to break it up there. It's common sense in a daily life. It's not common sense when you've got huge, big processes that move slowly. And yeah, unfortunately. Otherwise, we'd have done it a long time ago, possibly.
Thank you. What is the difference between a coach and a mentor?
Okay, so now we get into my definition of what an agile coach is, which I kind of meant afterwards. And I really see a coach like a tennis coach, like a football coach, like a sports coach. That is my definition of coaching. Versus mentoring, which is, so my definition of coaching in that sense is, and I'll say this because, I mean, I spent my time as a dev, as an architect, as a solutions architect, as a project manager, okay? I've done all of this stuff. I've done it with teams. And now when I come in and coach, I kind of have a pretty good feeling for what's possible within the situation that we find ourselves at the moment. And if you want to make that improvement, I can help you get there, right? That's how I see it. But it's about the technicality, so to speak, of where we are. Mentoring for me is much more Like, let's say another agile coach in the company is having trouble and they come and we talk and we discuss this and we say, okay, what do you think? You think you could do this? Have you tried this and stuff like that? For me, that's much more in the classical coaching, mentoring side of things, which I think there's a complete role for, are taking product owners aside to one side and having like mentoring chats about the challenges they have and stuff like that. So for me, I think it's more to do with how I would define coach in terms of agile coaching. I'm not a huge fan of the term, but that's what I said. I see it like a sports coach. Is that clear enough?
For me, yes. I hope also for everyone else. Okay. If you need the support of the C-level to change an organization, does that mean that you change jobs till you find a company like that?
You're going to be changing a lot of jobs. No, you need to find, my view is you need to find an environment where there is enough space in that environment for you to do something that you find meaningful. And that doesn't require this, okay? There is still enough space. There's boundary conditions, edges, whatever you want to, constraints, whatever you want to call it. It's always going to be in place. But you need to find somewhere where you say, I've got space here to do work that I enjoy. I can see the improvement it's bringing. Is it Agile Nirvana? No. Is it, am I going to find, many companies that do that? Probably not. But I can do stuff here that I find meaningful. So if you go back to Dan Pink's 3 things that drive the inner motivation, and it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And he said afterwards, purpose was a little bit too big. Maybe I should have called it contribution. So do you have a feeling I can progress with what I'm doing? Do you feel you can make certain calls and decisions? And do you have that feeling of I'm making a contribution here and I'm getting feedback from people, which is showing me that my work is valuable? And you can do that in a doesn't have to be up to the C-level. Also, you'll be looking, I reckon, quite a long time.
Thank you. Would you say that the coaching journey can't end? One always needs a good coach, no matter how senior one is.
How am I to interpret this? Should I be retiring? I think something that I've come to appreciate over the years is that I feel at this stage, okay, I spent a lot of time being the youngest. And then at some point I realized, oh shit, I'm becoming the... Ever had this feeling? When did this happen? And he's like, why am I older than... You're the same age as my daughter. This kind of thing happens and you notice yourself moving up. And it's a kind of and the worst bit, of course, is when you're getting that bit and you go, and when did I become my father? It's like your attitudes are just, but I think what you bring, you're right, there isn't, because this experience is, I think experience is super valuable. It's the bit I'm happiest about with that journey, with all the ups and downs, everything else. That experience to a certain extent is invaluable. And you can mix this experience with the earlier phases, because sometimes you want that energy from the early phase. You want someone to really want to have a go at it, because that could be great, because you're like too much still falling back into the cynical, pragmatic point of view. And so you can balance things out a little bit, and also to kind of help people sometimes to focus on what they can actually get changed.
Thank you. So a statement, if anything, what I learned today is to lower my expectations.
Preferably over an old-fashioned was the cocktail we were drinking, okay? So that's the cocktail to drink. As you lower your expectations, lower an old-fashioned, or maybe it was a Negroni, I can't remember.
I'm also looking at the time, so we will, I guess, do 2 more questions, and then we should be good for mingling. What is the typical way to become an Agile coach? Agile Transformation Manager, Scrum Master, RTE, ... question mark.
I think that there's something I have strong opinions about, is that this is like an apprenticeship. You can't do a training course. You can only learn it by doing it, and it takes years. So by that, I mean, yes, of course, you can start with the course and you can read up on it and stuff like that. You have to do it. This has to be done. You can only learn it by doing it. And one of the things that you'll notice is that when you're at it long enough and you've held trainings and you've done all this kind of stuff, Seriously, there is no question you can ask me about Scrum, Lean, Kanban. There's no accusation you can make them. There's nothing you can do that'll make me angry. I have heard it all before. I have heard it all. You can say nothing new to me. Sorry, I'm not boasting. I've just been here for long enough. I've heard it all. And I can deal with it. Standing here now, like that. And that's the difference between going to a 2-day CSM, hearing about it a little bit, playing around with a team, and having done it for 15 years, where, I'm sorry, that sounds like big-headed, but I'm just being honest. I have had, you get everything. You go to course, you get everything thrown at you. It's just mini waterfall. It's this, it's that, all this kind of stuff. That's why that theoretical fundamental basis is great to have, to come back to. But you get this experience, you have to do it. You have to answer those questions. You have to get faster to answer those questions. If you're into story points, can you explain why they're useful or not? Or is somebody going to shoot you down with no estimates? It's experience. You just got to do, doing it.
Mhm.
You learn it by doing it. And by trying to make those mistakes as small as possible along the way.
Okay, so one last question. What makes an agile coach truly efficient?
I love the way the word is efficient. What's going through my head at the moment? Do they mean effective? Efficient agile coaches are really fast at pulling off post-it notes, okay? And they can clean up a room after a workshop in like 2.5 minutes really quickly and put everything in the paper recycling bin, and that's efficiency. And what you're looking for is effective agile coaching. What makes it effective? Honestly, effectiveness, I'm presuming that's what's meant by the question. Effectiveness, I love when I hear that some seed I planted in a team is growing and you realize you did something and you had an effect in a way maybe you didn't know at the time when you come back later on. So as an example, I did magic estimation with the team recently to explain them how they could quickly do a backlog and work out if maybe they could deliver or not, okay? They thought, oh, yeah, we can do this. And I looked at it and I was going, yeah, okay, fair enough. There's your car, there's the wall, drive as fast as you want. And so they didn't get it done. So they weren't my team. I was just like dropping in to kind of show them how something get done. But having not delivered that release, the next release, they did the exercise themselves on their own without me, and they decided to throw stuff out of the release, and I went, that's a win. That for me is effectiveness. And it's like planting seeds. It's very hard sometimes to measure, but you're planting seeds, you're planting ideas, you're planting small little, hopefully, changes in behavior that all add up together to make something bigger.
Thank you, Robert.
Mystical.
So we are done now with the Q&A. I will hand it back to Jelena.
Thank you. As expected. Good. So this is the part where I will do the closing for at least this part. Robert, as mentioned, will move to the remote participants to answer follow-up questions. And thanks to our host, we will move to kitchen area to get some more food and drinks and continue talking. I hope you get some inspiring thoughts and also something you can take further to the conversations. What I also wanted to mention, as usual, we will organize another meetup we don't have exact schedule, but like 1 month or 2. We are pretty agile in that regard. So keep notifications on Meetup platform on, and we are looking forward to see you next time as well. So that would be it. Thank you.